I will say this, it's flying by too quick. It's going too fast. I love it, and I binge watched college football on Saturday. I was not on the road, and it was nice. Started cooking early. Opened a Key City, Mississippi blonde, Mississippi Queen, before noon. And so that was all good. But we talked about the slate of the four games in the SEC, and all of them were compelling and close. I know Bama, Georgia wasn't close early, but, man, give Georgia credit for coming back. So we're going to unpack a little bit of it here with Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN. He joins us on the Out of Bounds show. 105.9 The Zone, ESPN, brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. It's good to be Blue, the official healthcare provider of the Out of Bounds show. Don't you feel like the season's flying by, Luke?
Oh, you have no idea. Like every single week, I say to myself, how in the world is it week 5? Or now, how in the world is it week 6? It's very, very frustrating.
I know.
We spend all this time waiting for the season to come, and then in the blink of an eye, it's gone.
Dude, I mean, I'm loving it, but I'm like, let's just slow down just a little bit. Let's get into Ole Miss and Kentucky. I was in Oxford Wednesday and Thursday last week, and we did a show, and this past offseason was the big rev up for them. They said this is their best, most talented roster ever, even over 2015. And the expectations are the college football playoff, maybe even playing in the SEC championship game, and maybe the ability to navigate your way through the playoff. Kentucky comes to town, who had been embarrassed by South Carolina and gave Georgia a hell of a scare. So unpack it for me, Luke. They go down and score. And I mean, like, it was easy, just like opening a cold beer and taking a sip.
Yeah.
And then from there, Kentucky made it extremely difficult all day and mucked up the game and ended up winning the ball game. Walk me through your thoughts and what you saw as far as Kentucky beating Ole Miss 20-17.
So it reminded me so much of the Ole Miss-Tulane game that I had last year that was really close for about 3.5 quarters. And the reason why it was close was because Tulane was more physical in their defensive front and disrupted the pace of play for Ole Miss. And I've talked to you about this before. When Ole Miss can't go fast, when they're not dictating terms to the defense and they're off schedule, they're a different team. And personally, I thought Kentucky physically whipped them. I thought Kentucky was the more physical team. I thought they beat them up. They got them frustrated because they couldn't have their way and just do what they normally are accustomed to doing. Now, the reason why that is, and I've said this multiple times in the last 48 hours, they did themselves no favors with that schedule. Because with that schedule leading into that game, you're never challenged. You develop a false sense of reality. You begin to think it's easy, and you never faced adversity. You never got into a tight spot in a game. And then all of a sudden you're in a dogfight versus a team that's got nothing to lose. They're on the road, and they're a pretty decent football team. And I just felt they responded to the moment better than Ole Miss did. And the longer they were able to hang around, the more it became apparent, hey, Ole Miss is in trouble here. And I think the other thing that I thought was really impressive is Kentucky came into the game with a plan to utilize 2 quarterbacks in their run game. And I don't think Ole Miss expected to see Brock Vandagriff be a portion of the run game for Kentucky. And it caused them fits. I mean, they converted a ton of 2nd and shorts and 3rd and shorts with quarterback run. And then what happened when Ole Miss came up and started to load the box a little bit more, that's why Brock Vandagriff had his best day through the air, because he had a bunch of one-on-one matchups. And those wide receivers at Kentucky are pretty good, Bo.
Well, you mentioned that last week, and you mentioned Dane Key, but what is it, Barry and Brown?
Darian Brown, yeah, he's a problem.
Good Lord. What about that catch and
Yeah.
run late in the game?
Oh yeah, he's really good, really explosive, gutsy call too to make that throw there.
Well,
Um,
I want to talk about that. Tom Luginbill on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. I thought Lane in his post game said, "Hey, that was uncharacteristic of Mark Stoops."
Yeah.
The analytics have shown us that Mark, and he is. I'm not saying he's not a good coach, but he is a conservative coach.
Fairly conservative. Yes.
And so just talk about how, because hell, I'm just sitting there drinking a cold beer. I didn't think he would call that play, Luke's, in that moment.
I didn't either, or allow the offensive coordinator to do it, but I kind of felt like Brock Vandagriff was having a little bit of, I don't want to say a coming out party, but he's been above average, probably at best. I thought he played his best game by far, and they were feeling it a little bit, and they're like, you know what? Let's take a shot to our best skilled player and just let's make it happen. Let's do it. And he found him. The guy made the play, and obviously we know the rest of it. And listen, I mean, you've heard me say this 100 times. Everybody's going to say, oh, my goodness, Gavin Wimsatt comes in, they run the football, he fumbles the ball, and it just happens to bounce right into the arms of another Kentucky player for the touchdown. Yeah, that's called luck. Everybody needs it. It's a part of every single game, no matter how good of a team you are, no matter how bad of a team you are. It's part of the game, and it can happen for you, and it can happen against you.
Yeah. Tom Luginbill with ESPN on the Out of Bounds show. All right, let's talk about the Ole Miss running game. Lane loves to run the football, and he's part of this new wave or age of coaches that are doing it in a super cool way. They get explosive plays through the air. Hell, Dart and Trey Harris were the only thing they had. Without them, good grief.
Exactly.
But one thing that we have come to see with Lane Kiffin, with Jerrion Ely and Judkins and some others, Snoop Connor, is they can flat out run downhill on you. They were not able to do that on Saturday.
Nope.
If they can't do that going forward, what does this mean for the 2024 Ole Miss team?
It means that they're going to not be able to move the ball with as much ease and as much regularity because they're totally dependent on tempo and winning first down, meaning they get themselves in a second and manageable, so in their mind they can do whatever they want. But when that doesn't happen, and this happened on Saturday, it changes the approach. I think it puts them, Bo, into a mode of operation that they don't want to live in, right? They don't want to be slowed down. They don't want to take their time. They don't want to utilize the clock. And, when you're not getting first downs regularly, it's hard to go fast. And so if you look at the teams they're going to have to play going forward, you look at the fronts, you look at some of the physicality that they're going to face, they're going to have to step it up front because I just thought Kentucky was the more physical football team.
Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds show and the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. And this segment is brought to you by an ice-cold Budweiser and wings at Martin's in Livingston tonight or tomorrow. Okay, this weekend, you got Ole Miss at South Carolina. Ole Miss is laying 8. That's a tough place to play. I think Ole Miss has a better staff, and I think they have better talent. But that does not mean that they are going to win the game. And South Carolina's coming. They had an off week this past weekend. Handicap this one for me, Luke.
Well, I think it all depends on if Lenora Sellers is back in the lineup for South Carolina, because I don't think Robbie Ashford can beat Ole Miss. I may be wrong, but I don't think that is South Carolina's best shot to take down Ole Miss. You're right. I think Ole Miss is the better team with the better players. They're going to have to get out of a funk, right? They're going to have to get back past the bad taste in their mouth now, because that was not a game on their schedule that they circled as a potential loss. If going back to your comments about the college football playoff, if you're looking at the schedule and you're navigating that thing, that is not a game you could lose if you're an Ole Miss fan and you're looking at it. So now you got to regroup. You got to go on the road, tough environment. South Carolina, I think, has really improved. But I think it comes down to the quarterback. Which quarterback is under center for South Carolina?
Okay, I was going back and forth with a South Carolina guy, and he was leaning Robbie Ashford. But he said if Lenoris could go, he was playing. But what does that mean? I mean, what does that look like by Thursday, I guess, or Friday?
Well, if they've had a bye week, and I'm not sure what the injury was to Lenoris Sellers, but that's 2 full weeks of being able to get right. Actually 3, because they had to play with Robbie Ashford versus, what was it? Was it Akron? Maybe?
Yeah.
Can't remember who it was. So now it's been 3 weeks.
Yeah, 3 weeks to see if he can get that. I think it was an ankle, maybe a high ankle sprain or something.
Okay.
South Carolina's got some edge rushers. I think that could be a problem.
Dylan Stewart's a problem.
Okay. I knew you would know
problem.
at least a couple of the personnel. I don't know a lot about them, but I did watch a little bit of the 31-6 game against Kentucky. But I watched, that was Kentucky, Georgia. I watched all of that. All right. So Ole Miss, South. So you give Ole Miss, it sounds like a 3 to 5 point edge or something like that, right? On the road?
Yeah, I do. And I'll tell you the other thing too that I'm very interested in seeing, and I'm interested about this with all teams that are heavily populated with transfer portal players, because in this era that we have, right, your transfer portal players, if they're high end players, they're also highly paid players, and I'm always very curious about the psychological dynamic of what's a player's level of commitment to the team and the program and the locker room when things don't go well, because sometimes like, for example, what Florida State's going through right now, they had done a really, really good job in the transfer portal. Now all of a sudden they haven't, and you bring in a bunch of hired mercenaries and things don't go well. They don't care about the team, right? I'm not saying that that's where Ole Miss is. This was one game. It was disappointing, but I want to see their star players, their high-end players, their best players rise to the occasion.
I want to see who's going to emerge as their running back. Henry Parrish Jr. got nicked up pretty good in that game. For whatever reason, Lane hasn't played Bentley. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if he didn't do something right. Lane was very short, and I don't know, and I can't predict the future. Yesterday in his press conference about Bentley, I think it's Diggs from LSU that transferred to there, who hasn't played
Logan
yet,
Diggs.
and I think he's trying to get back from an injury. So there's no Judkins, but there's some talent, but there's a lot of moving parts, Luke, as to where this goes.
Well, you're right, and I think because there is no Judkins, you're seeing the drop off, right? I mean, that's he's different than everybody else. So you had to expect there was going to be a level of drop off. How steep, I don't know. What we've seen to this point, I don't know how you would categorize it, but I think that's an area that as many replenishments as they brought in, it was probably a deficit at that position.
Yeah. And one other thing that this goes to Brad White, defensive, who I know you've talked about him on the show, but he is a phenomenal young coach and has done.
Yep.
He's by far and away Stoops is that and the older guy that I think is the O-line associate head coach there that evidently is a freak in recruiting. But Brad White is one of the top 10% DCs in the country. He did an amazing job against a talented group like Dart and Trey and those guys. One thing that surprised me, Luke, I don't know if you have any thoughts on it, is they were also able to contain Dart. A lot of times Dart can get loose once a game and run for 23 yards on you, and it's just a backbreaker on the drive, and then he takes another snap and he hits Trey Harris or pre-scoring or something.
Sure. No, I agree with you. There wasn't as much of that. They were out of sorts. I think that's one of the best ways to phrase it. When you get so accustomed to seeing a team be such a well-oiled machine where everything they dial up executes, and then to not see that, how can you not have a level of frustration seep in, right? After you go 4 straight weeks where it was really easy, you weren't challenged, and I just think it gives you a false sense of reality. If I was looking forward and I was Lane Kiffin or the administration there, I wouldn't do that again. I'd throw a big game somewhere in that first 3 weeks.
And one more thing on this, because this is the game of the week in this state, because Mississippi State's off and struggling this year, and Ole Miss still has a lot to play for. If Robbie, I think Luke's hit on this for our listeners, and I think Luke's will agree with this. If Robbie Ashford plays, I don't see how South Carolina can score enough points, even if it's low scoring like the Kentucky Ole Miss game. I don't see how the Gamecocks can score enough points to win unless Ole Miss helps them. Your thoughts, Luke?
I totally agree with you. I think, and I've always felt that way. I've shared that with you, that if talent is not equitable across the board, and I would say in this instance, it's not, a Georgia-South Carolina gap, but it's still a fairly significant gap, then the better team has to help you. They have to do something uncharacteristic to their nature that will provide an opportunity. Now, they may provide an opportunity, but you still have to go execute it and take advantage of it.
All right, let's go to Tom Luginbill, National College Football Analyst with ESPN. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Let's go. Bama, Georgia was wild. Bama dominates, and gets up big. And credit to Kirby and that staff at halftime to come back. But what about what DeBoer and Milroe did to start off that game against all those 4- and 5-star players on defense?
You know what? I don't know if it's so much what they did. It was that Georgia didn't have a defense to it. All week long, Kirby Smart talked about Jalen Milroe and what a problem and a handful he was. And he put you in such a bind because you can't bracket receivers. You can't double people because you're constantly worried about quarterback run. They knew it was coming, and they couldn't stop it. I think the level of execution from Alabama's offense, they didn't do anything tricky. They didn't do anything that Georgia probably didn't expect. They just out-executed Georgia and did not have what I thought was a viable plan to stop quarterback run in the first half. Now, they shaped things up in the second half, obviously, and that part of the game slowed down, and I think it helps Georgia crawl back in. But I was really stunned to see the difference in the level of execution. I don't think it was anything out of the realm of expectation or normalcy. They just were flat out better.
What do you think? I mean, what did Kirby do at halftime? They just got in the right place and settled down and figured a couple of – I mean, they've got just as good of players as Bama, as you know. I mean, did it just come down to getting their blank, their head out of their blank? What did you see there?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I think maybe more so than anything, they might have made a couple of tweaks to their alignment within the box in terms of how they were going to handle and defend quarterback run if they were going to continue to see it. And that ended up settling itself out. And then they were able to get off the field more. When they were able to get off the field, because they couldn't in the first half, obviously that created more opportunities.
Good point.
Yeah, I mean, that's what allowed Georgia to crawl back in the game. And the thing that was so funny to me is the first half you're sitting there going, what is going on? This is supposed to be arguably one of the greatest matchups in the history of college football. And in the last quarter and a half, it was. Like it turned into the game we all thought we were going to watch for 4 quarters.
Hey, I'm not one that's sitting here going, Georgia's not any good. That's not my takeaway from a game like that. I still believe that they are the 2 best teams in the country with Texas and Ohio State behind them. Now I'm monitoring Tennessee because I love what they're doing, and that DC and what the Vols have is kind of cool. Yeah. But I didn't move Georgia out of the top tier just because of that game. Did you?
Oh, no, I don't think they're out of the top tier. They just, we haven't seen them not play well. I mean, the bottom line is that's a big part. Like, it becomes so glaring and over magnified because you don't see it, right? Because they've been so used to dominance and clean play and overwhelming the opponent. And when they don't, even if it's in Alabama, it's not competitive, because that was not competitive in the first half. It becomes over magnified, where it's other teams, it doesn't, because we've just become so spoiled to seeing them play a certain brand of football. And when you don't see it, it stands out more.
All right. Which way, if you had if you had to bet a steak dinner on it, which way are you going with Hugh Freeze and Auburn? Hugh recognizes that he made a mistake, and the Auburn faithful who are committed commit $1.5 million in the offseason to a QB. Like a Taylon. I mean, if he had Taylon Green or my gosh, if he had McCord at Syracuse.
Eli Holstein at Pitt.
Yeah.
Pavia.
Yeah.
At Vanderbilt.
Pavia. Good Lord.
A bunch of good guys out there.
I mean, there's guys left and right. So I know a lot of people love to hate him, and a lot of people still recognize that he's very talented and whatever. But I believe he'll correct the mistake, and they'll still recruit in the top 12 or 13, and he'll get it going. How do you see it, Luke?
Yeah, he's got to hit on a quarterback. I mean, at the end of the day, and to be honest with you, that game, they outplayed Oklahoma. They deserved to beat Oklahoma. Everything was going fine. They were putting together nice drives. They were running the football. Cam Coleman got involved defensively. Outside of 2 plays, they played really good. But what he did in the fourth quarter on that pass attempt was coaching malpractice. Why would you do that?
Right.
Why would you put that offense in that position at that time with 2 minutes to go in the game, and you're in control of the game?
Right.
You're in control of it. And it's just that's what's wearing, I think, on Auburn fans right now is they recognize that the rest of the team is pretty talented, and the quarterback is such a mess they can't stop turning it over. Well, then this week they don't turn it over. They're playing clean, and then he puts the guy in a position to throw the football, and he throws a pick six.
Yeah.
And you're going, you got to be kidding me. So, yeah, listen, I think the patience is wearing thin. I don't think there's any question about that, but he's got a track record of putting things together and fixing it. But you know as well as I do, man, Auburn's a different place. Like that is a
dude. They will burn your house down in 5 seconds if things aren't going right. I love them. I love going down there. I had friends go there, but they are nuts, and they
are,
and that's what's driven them to win. But it's also driven them to make poor decisions, like getting rid of Gus Malzahn. But we don't have time to get into all that. But that was fantastic. 20-something minutes with Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN. So where are you this week?
I'm back down in Atlanta for Georgia Tech. I got 5-0 Duke. Manny Diaz coaching them up. Coming down to Atlanta to take on Georgia Tech after they've coming off of a bye weekend.
Oh, dude, Manny ripped North Carolina's heart out over the weekend.
Oh, did he?
Good grief.
Mac Brown fired him at Texas after that BYU debacle.
You damn right he did.
The option. Yep.
Because Manny left Mississippi State to take that job back in 2010. I had a steak dinner with him.
Right.
Fascinating dude. Very charismatic. Looks like he should be running a private equity firm out of New York.
I know it.
See you, buddy. Have a good week.
All right, pal. Be good.
The Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. It's good to be blue.